Let's speak now to Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, about all the ghoulish goings-on in the government. Good morning to you, Henry.
Good morning.
Now, Rachel Reeves, I mean, on the surface of it, it's just a rubbish story, isn't it? I mean, she doesn't know what's going on in her world. She's let out her house when she moved to number 11. Her husband was supposed to be taking care of business, and then an estate agent. I mean, let's be fair, most estate agents are utterly useless. You know, we're supposed to send off for some licence. They didn't do it because they resigned. And as I know from previous existence as a renter, estate agents just never get around to doing anything because they're all just sitting under slankets and going out to Starbucks and watching Real Housewives instead of sitting in an office and answering calls and sending emails and doing stuff. But it's, you know, how much is she culpable for this, do you reckon?
Well, I mean, it depends on which version of the story ends up being true, because originally she told the Prime Minister and the independent ethics advisor that she and her husband didn't know that they needed to have this license. Then it turns out that actually they did, but apparently it was her husband who had asked for it and it was the estate agents who hadn't applied for it. And then I saw yesterday that there was a tweet, because there's always a tweet these days, in which she had welcomed on Twitter the extension of this licensing regime to the bit of her city where that she represents, and was defending the whole decision to have a licensing regime as a way of cracking down on rogue landlords. Like, look, do I think necessarily that Rachel Reeves deliberately set out to break the rules and save a bit of cash? No, if for no other reason than the risk reward calculation, if you're a senior politician for doing something like this, is just wildly out of whack. But it's a fine example, if nothing else, of the way that all of these little regulations that they bring in, that politicians love to bring in, and whenever someone's caught breaking them, it's always the politicians who are first up on the soapbox saying, well, you know, it's somebody's responsibility to check the rules. It's an amazing example of how they trip people up, right? Because frankly, we have a housing crisis. If Rachel Reeves has moved out of a property because she's obviously moved into number 11 or wherever, it's good that it's on the market. It's good that there are people who are able to live in it. But maybe when she's squeezing landlords until the pips squeak, when she's part of a government that's bringing in things like the Renters Reform Bill, which is proposing to make life even more difficult, maybe next time she's doing something like that, she'll remember this and think, you know what, I was caught out. I was not doing anything particularly wrong. Maybe I should ease up. But of course, will that actually happen? No. It's always embarrassing when politicians get caught, but fundamentally, they're always very happy for the rest of us to get caught out by this.
I know, that is the thing. That is the real hypocrisy at the heart of this, that it's a Labour council, and it's all Labour councils who like to bring in these licences because they love a bit of bureaucracy. They like making extra coinage on the side with paperwork. But what really strikes me at the heart of all of this is this woman is in charge of a multi-billion-pound budget at a time when our economy couldn't be even more in the doldrums, right? She's got to make everything add up. She's got to probably cut red tape to try and inspire some growth, not that she knows what cutting red tape looks like. She's got to somehow bring down the national debt. She's got to make sure that we're not going over to the IMF and knocking on their door and going, oh, yeah, can we have a giant charity check? Oh, that's right. You can't actually summon the right amount of money to even begin to plug the massive hole that we have in our particular ledger. And yet she can't even manage the paperwork of her own estate, which is one house. It's one house. How the hell is she supposed to be running a country when she can't even have basic oversight of her own affairs? I mean, look, I've just gone through the process of buying a house, and you've got a checklist and you make sure things are done. And by and large, if things hadn't been done, I'd be the person chasing them up saying, do you think they need to be done? What happens next? I'm a busy woman. Right? I've got a lot to do. I don't have PAs and assistants and spads and all the other things that she has access to. I just think it's, you know, constantly what we see from this government is sheer incompetence. They're just utterly useless. They're moronic.
Look, politically, in terms of the political damage of the story, you're entirely correct. I mean, there are obviously rules about using SPADs and things for running your personal affairs, but also she delegated that to someone else. There's two of them, remember? Even if she is very, very busy running the country, I think between two fully functioning adults, you can broadly be expected to keep on top of this kind of thing most of the time. Although they're but for the grace of God go I suppose. But it's also never good. it's never good for politicians to be involved in this kind of story, because the absolute last thing you want is to be reminding the great mass of the nation, which is obviously in the middle of a cost of living crisis and a very long economic slump and struggling to make ends meet, that you happen to own multiple houses, right? That's the reason that stories like this are so dangerous. It's the reason that they were so dangerous for Angela Rayner. I mean, and there are briefs where it matters more than others. Rayner was in the housing portfolio, which is obviously not a really bad one. And Rachel Reeves is similarly in a really sensitive brief, because as Chancellor, she is the first line of attack and defence for the government's entire economic agenda, right? It is going to be her that has to stand up when she delivers the budget, and it's almost certainly going to be an extremely painful budget, and has to say, this is why I'm raising your taxes. Right?
Yeah.
This is why I'm not cutting your taxes. This is why I'm taking more money from you. This is why I'm making all of these decisions which are going to have a big impact on your life and potentially leave you with less money in your pocket at the end of the month. And the last thing you want, if you're the government, is for that politician, of all politicians, to have been caught just a couple of months before, apparently saving money that they shouldn't have saved, that they were only in a position to do in the first place because they happened to be lucky enough to have a spare home.
Yeah, I know.
That they're able to let out, right? So even if it was an innocent mistake, and I don't dispute that it could be, right? I've got no window into Rachel Reeves' soul or anything like that. Even if it was an innocent mistake, one, as you say, it contributes to a narrative of incompetence, but two, you just don't want your Chancellor of all people, you don't want your Chancellor of the Exchequer to be reminding everybody else that actually she's fairly privileged and well off before she comes along and makes them worse off with higher taxes.
Oh, no, indeed. They seem to be able to, rub together a few coins, don't they, in the Labour Party? And you kind of think, how? Because most of them have never actually had a job before they got into politics. And politics, in theory, is not supposed to pay you that well. Let's talk now about good old non-Prince Andrew. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, finally stripped of his royal titles. He's going to be booted out of Royal Lodge to go rattle around in the royal estate over in the east of the country. I mean, I suppose the big question with this one is, why didn't they do something sooner? What I understand is King Charles said he didn't want to be rushed, he wanted to be right about all of this. But we knew for a long time, it's been about 15 years this has been going on, and we've known that whatever he said, at the very least, he continued to cavort and have companionship with a convicted paedophile. At the very least, that is, probably enough for me to say off with his head.
Well, I mean, I was going to say he is very lucky, of course, that he has fallen out of the king's favour in this day and age, rather than the day and age when the consequences were getting your head chopped off. I suppose from the monarchy's perspective, look, I mean, every organisation that ends up in this kind of hole, normally from some kind of PR management spiral where they've tried to shut down a story and ended up in a far worse position, the monarchy is fundamentally not different to any other organisation in that regard. I don't know if you during the post office crisis, when I was sat there, jaw on the floor, being like, how on earth did the post office get this deep into what it was doing, rather than just sort of copping to it and moving on? And I think that there is that kind of problem. In fairness, it is important to note, of course, that Andrew has not been convicted of anything in a court of law, and Virginia Giuffre, when she did take the royal family to court, she accepted a settlement which did not involve Andrew admitting culpability of anything. And so I do think that sometimes we can, as journalists, lose sight of that fact a little bit. He's not actually been convicted in a court of law of anything, and his accuser did accept a settlement that didn't involve him admitting he'd done anything wrong. So you can see why there might also
is this going to be the end of the story, though? Because what I understand is this kind of opens the door for there to potentially be a private prosecution. Certainly the campaign anti-monarchist organisation Republic say they are going to be the ones to bring that. I mean, if the royal family thought that this was now going to be a swift solution and we can just all move on from it, it doesn't seem to me that that's likely to be the case.
Well, of course, Republic would do it as a massive PR stunt, but we don't know. Look, I'm not a lawyer, and I haven't looked into what they're proposing to do. But effectively, the Republic, I think last night, yesterday, the leader of Republic was demanding that the king agree to a criminal investigation, which is not how criminal investigations actually work. I mean, shockingly, the police don't actually need your permission to go and conduct a criminal investigation into your affairs if they think that one's necessary. It would be a very funny justice system if they did. But I mean, a private prosecution for what? Again, I think the thing that spikes the guns on that a little bit is that there was one with Virginia Giuffre, and there was a settlement. It's not as if this hasn't been looked into. So Will this staunch the bleeding from a public relations perspective? It will certainly help. I mean, there is the slightly awkward fact, of course, that Andrew is not a commoner, because English law has three categories. It has the king, nobility, and commoners. And stripping somebody of titles, the king can do, but stripping them of noble status actually requires an act of parliament. And I don't know if Sir Keir Starmer is going to spend his time bringing forward that particular act of parliament when he's got so much on his plate, but Andrew is still technically
Well, it's
nobility.
actually David Lammy, isn't it? I think it's David Lammy who's in charge of the list of peers or something or the other. I'd imagine he wouldn't mind sinking his teeth into something like that. But I don't think this solves the problem at all. We all sort of, have our attitudes and opinions about Andrew. We know what went on. That's not suddenly erased from history. We're not going to suddenly forget. And it's an unfortunate stain on the royal family, but at the same time, I don't think it necessarily has as terrible an impact on them as some people may worry. Before I let you go, Henry, have you got a ghost story? Have you ever seen a ghoul?
I don't know if I've ever seen a ghoul, but I share your absolute love of the genre. And to anyone who really loves these things, the M.R. James, the classic titan of Victorian ghost stories, and there's a few, if you have Audible or the audiobook service, there's a few of those that were released a couple of years ago, read by David Suchet, and they're my absolute favorite Christmas tradition. They're absolutely brilliantly done. So I don't know if I've seen one myself, probably lucky me, but for anyone who loves a good ghost story, M.R. James, and especially some of the audio on M.R. James, is where I go for it at Christmas.
Amazing. I love it. I'm going to dig into that because I love a good ghost story. Henry, thank you ever so much. And if you're interested, folks, have I ever seen a ghost? I must admit, when I looked in the mirror this morning, I thought that there was a ghoul staring back at me. That was before, of course, the cement mixer got churning up and I put all my slap on, my wall paint, and began to look like a human again. But I looked like some sort of corpse of Rick Parfitt come back to life at about 6:30.